Amos 9, verse 2. Though they dig into hell, thence shall mine hand take them. Though they climb up to heaven, thence will I bring them down. Okay, the hell, this is not Sheol, it's not the grave, it's not the city dump, it's actually hell. And the Bible clearly tells you what hell is. Just like the song, I was surprised to see that song had mentioned hell in it. You don't find many songs that mention anything about hell, but that's from reading the Bible. You find out what God thinks of things. Sometimes it's referred to as the bottomless pit. That is, you continue to fall. And I like that description of it. The Bible uses that bottomless pit description. Paul says it this way: you've fallen from grace. That is, grace was available, and you tried to do something else. Well, anything that a man tries to do other than accept what God's already done is a stumble. They've fallen. They've fallen from grace. Now, I think that means this. Not they had grace and they lost it. I mean, that's one take on it. But I think what it means is they've fallen on the way to it, or they've fallen away from it. It's a fall. And they'll continue to fall in the bottomless pit. Look at Deuteronomy 32. Deuteronomy 32:22. I'm going to cover a bunch of these verses on hell just because you need to know it's here. I mean, y'all know it, but this is a list you can have handy when somebody mentions they don't believe there's a hell. If you don't believe there's a hell, you shouldn't believe there's a heaven. I mean, and some people will tell you that hell is just a temporary holding cell. Well, then that would make heaven temporary too, wouldn't it? No, but they're both eternal. Now, hell does get an upgrade at the end to the lake of fire, but that's worse than the hell that was already in it. Deuteronomy 32:22. For a fire is kindled in mine anger, and shall burn unto the lowest hell, and shall consume the earth with her increase, and set on fire the foundations of the mountains. Okay, that just pretty well describes it, doesn't it? It's going to be hot. Psalm 16, verse 10. Psalm 16, verse 10. This is David as a prophet speaking for Jesus Christ. He says, For thou wilt not leave my soul in hell, neither wilt thou suffer thine Holy One to see corruption. You know, Jonah was a good type of Jesus Christ, but he's human, so he couldn't be a perfect type of him. Jonah did see corruption. He says, You've brought me up from corruption. Jesus Christ never saw corruption. Psalm 71, verse 20. Psalm 71:20. Thou, which hast shown me the great and sore troubles, shalt quicken me again, and shalt bring me up again from the depths of the earth. That's not a far away on the earth. It's the depths, down deep inside the earth. That's where hell is. He mentioned in our passage in Amos that somebody was going to try to dig down into it. So if you had a big enough shovel and you were strong enough, you could dig far enough, you'd hit hell. Isaiah 66:24. Isaiah 66:24. And they shall go forth and look upon the carcasses of the men that have transgressed against me. For their worm shall not die, neither shall their fire be quenched, and they shall be an abhorring to all flesh. That's talking about in the tribulation. Hell is going to be open to be observed. People will be cast directly into it. And I believe it's going to be off of the north, south, east, the west side of Jerusalem. It'll be the valley of Megiddo, where that comes down in there, and the Tophet is what it's called in Ezekiel and Isaiah. And he says in Matthew 5 that there's 3 punishments. If you say Raka to your brother, you're in danger of hellfire. You go before the council. Okay, the fire, in danger of the fire, means that from the council, your sentence is go to hell, and they pitch you right in. And here's another case where they can actually see the men that are burning there. Yes? Yep, that's it. Ezekiel 31:14. Ezekiel 31:14. We've seen the depths of the earth, referring to the bottomless pit. Here's another terminology that means the same thing. To the end that none of all the trees by the waters exalt themselves for their height, neither shoot up their tops among the thick boughs. Boughs. Neither their trees stand up in their height. All that drank water, for they are all delivered unto death to the nether parts of the earth. Nether, we would think that means other. It doesn't mean other, it means deepest, like the depths of the earth. In the midst of the children of men, with them that go down into the pit. So a nether part is something you go down into like a pit. That's the bottomless pit. In that passage, look down at verse 16. I made the nations to shake at the sound of his fall when I cast him down to hell with them that descend into the pit. Down there at the end of the verse, the nether parts of the earth. He's describing what that is. Verse 17. They also went down into hell. It's down. You find it again in verse 18. Brought down with the trees of Edom unto the nether parts of the earth. So fortunately, the Bible knows that we don't understand things if it doesn't explain them to us. So he told us what nether parts of the earth is. It means down into a pit. Jonah, find Jonah chapter 2. Jonah 2 verse 2. And said, I cried by reason of mine affliction unto the Lord, and he heard me. Out of the belly of hell cried I. And thou heardest my voice, for thou hast cast me into the deep, in the midst of the seas, and the floods compassed me about. All thy billows and thy waves passed over me. Then said I am cast out of thy sight, yet I will look again toward thy holy temple. The waters have compassed me about, even to the soul. The depths closed me round about. The weeds were wrapped about my head. I went down to the bottom of the mountains. With the earth with her bars was about me forever. Yet hast thou brought up my life from corruption. So he was beginning to corrupt. His body was beginning to deteriorate. And God brought him up from that. Had a whale run down there to hell and grab him and spit him out on land. Matthew chapter 12. Matthew 12 verse 40. Jonah just told us he was in hell, and I believe he literally was. Matthew 12 verse 40. And you think, well, he's a good guy, why would he go to hell? Well, they didn't have eternal security in the Old Testament. And he'd just been on a long journey running as hard as he could, as far as he could, from God. Where do you think he would go? Well, that's what happens. Now the Lord was merciful and gave him a revival. Matthew 12 verse 40. For as Jonas was 3 days and 3 nights in the whale's belly, so shall the Son of Man be 3 days and 3 nights in the heart of the earth. Okay, so that's 3 days and 3 nights in the heart. That's where hell is, right there in the heart of the earth. Acts 2 verse 27. Yep. Yep. Earth with her bars. Yeah, Jonah thought he was going to be there. He uses the phrase forever. And he said he was going to look toward the holy hill. There's some wild stuff in there. He's obviously couldn't have done that with natural eyes. You know, if you're in hell, the bottom of the depths, you know, and then you can look up to heaven. God had opened something. He had spiritual eyes he could see. Wild stuff. Acts, where am I? Acts 2, try verse 27. Acts 2:27. This is a repeat of what Psalms said, but we'll add something to it. Acts 2:27. Because thou wilt not leave my soul in hell, neither wilt thou suffer thine Holy One to see corruption. Drop down to 31. He, seeing this before, spake of the resurrection of Christ, that his soul was not left in hell. In case anybody was wondering what Psalms meant. He meant hell. Actual hell. And that's actually where he went. Look at Revelation 1:18. Revelation 1:18. Jesus speaking, I am he that liveth and was dead, and behold, I am alive forevermore. Amen. I always get a kick out of that. He amens himself. See, this is so good, I got to say amen here. And have the keys of hell and death. Look at the end of the book, Revelation 20. Revelation 20, verse 1. Revelation 20, verse 1. And I saw an angel come down from heaven. Okay, that's the opposite direction of hell. having the key of the bottomless pit. Okay, that's one description of it. And a great chain in his hand, and he laid hold on the dragon, that old serpent, which is the devil and Satan, and bound him 1,000 years, and cast him into the bottomless pit. There it is again. And shut him up, and set a seal upon him, that he should deceive the nations no more. I wish that was going on right now. Till the 1,000 years should be fulfilled, and after that he must be loosed a little season. All right, so we made it through one verse. Hell is a real place. It's really described in many places in the Bible. If you have a modern Bible, you might miss it. But if you've got a real Bible, it's going to plainly tell you about hell. It's not a scare tactic, it's reality. People say, don't scare people with hell, and that's what do they call it? You're trying to scare them into something. And no, it's not trying to scare somebody. There really is something scary about to happen. Amos 9, verse 3. Yeah. Don't tell somebody their building's burning down. That might scare them. All right. Amos 9, verse 3. And though they hide themselves in the top of Carmel. Did I say that right? Carmel? Yeah. I will search and take them out thence. And though they be hid from my sight in the bottom of the sea, thence will I command the serpent, and he shall bite them. And though they go into captivity before their enemies, thence will I command the sword, and it shall slay them. And I will set mine eyes upon them for evil and not for good. Whew. Verse 5. And the Lord God of hosts is he that toucheth the land, and it melteth, and all that dwell therein shall mourn. And it shall rise up wholly like a flood, and shall be drowned as by the flood of Egypt. That's the vengeance he's coming back with when he comes back at Armageddon. Verse 5, it calls him the Lord of hosts. That means an army. He's going to send hunters and fishers. He's actually going to seek out his enemy that's running from him. He won't give peace to anybody. It would be like somebody playing a game and the other person says, okay, I give up, and then you forcing them to finish the game. Only this won't be a game. Look at Jeremiah 16. Jeremiah 16, verse 16. Many of the Israelites had become God's enemy, and he levies this punishment against his own children. Jeremiah 16:16. Behold, I will send for many fishers, saith the Lord, and they shall fish them. And after will I send for many hunters, and they shall hunt them from every mountain and from every hill and out of the holes of the rocks. Now he's got 2 different times a year. I guess you could fish all year round down here, and probably some do, but usually you fish in the summertime. You hunt in the wintertime. So he's saying there's no safe time of year. When I decide to get you, I'll send somebody after you. And that was his people. They're reduced, of course, to just a small remnant there at the end. Lamentations 4. Lamentations 4, verse 16. Historically, this has all played out historically in a small dose. I mean, it didn't feel small to them. Read Jeremiah, he thought that he was, he's called the weeping prophet for a reason. It felt like devastation. But it was just a small picture of what's to come. Lamentations 4:16. The anger of the Lord hath divided them. He will no more regard them. They respect not the person of the priest. They favor not the elders. As for us, our eyes are yet veiled for our vain help. In our watching, we have watched for a nation that could not save us. Feel like this one? Yeah. Don't put your hope in a nation. No. We're of something that's beyond this world. We're Americans, and that's the best to be as far as the world's concerned. But even America is not going to save you. Our hope is in something much bigger. And it's a good thing we're a member, used to, if you were an American and you were overseas, it meant something. All you had to do was tell them you were an American. Used to, the travelers would carry an American flag with them in their pocket or something, in their luggage. Well, now it doesn't mean much, but used to it meant a lot. Well, for us, we got something way better. We are a citizen of heaven. And nobody down here can do anything to us that God doesn't approve. Verse 18. They hunt our steps, that we cannot go in our streets. Our end is near, our days are fulfilled, for our end is come. Our persecutors are swifter than the eagles of the heaven. They pursue us upon the mountains. They lay wait for us in the wilderness. Now he's talking there of two different types of pursuit. They're being pursued by humans, our enemies. But then also he talks about the eagles of heaven. God made all of these animals. We understand that. All of these animals work for him. So he can turn them loose. In fact, one of the punishments is that he'll turn lions loose in Jerusalem. And he'll do it. Amos 9, verse 10. Amos 9:10. Amos 9:10. All the sinners of my people shall die by the sword, which say the evil shall not overtake nor prevent us. God's not happy here. He says, these people have been saying, he might be doing that to somebody, but it won't happen to me. Don't get cocky. Look back up at verse 8. Shall not the land tremble for this, and every one mourn that dwelleth therein? And it shall rise up wholly as a flood, and it shall be cast out and drowned as by a flood of Egypt. As by the flood of Egypt. You find that in Revelation 12. I'm not going to turn there. We've seen it before. But that's what happens in the tribulation, a flood. And I believe that flood may be instigated by a tsunami, because you also see references to an earthquake. Amos 9, verse 6. Amos 9:6. It is he that buildeth his stories in the heavens. Now that's not nursery rhymes. It means different levels. A 3-story building, a 6-story building, whatever. And hath founded his troop in the earth. What's a troop? A troop's an army. He that calleth for the waters of the sea, and poureth them out upon the face of the earth, the Lord is his name. Now, notice the tone of this verse. This verse is not about happy good things. It's about God's mad, and here's his anger and vengeance and what he's capable of doing. It's important to know that, because he's going to talk about pouring water on the face of the earth. That's a demonstration of his wrath. His wrath is demonstrated in two ways, fire or water. He's already used the water a couple times. Next time it's going to be fire. Go back up to the beginning of that. He says he buildeth his stories in the... This is not the way we would speak in English. Stories, is that singular or plural? That's plural. In the... You would think it'd be heavens. It's heaven singular. One building with many stories. Okay. Genesis chapter 6. Genesis 6, verse 16. Heaven has 3 stories. The Muslims want to make it 7. But the Bible, what?
Are you saying there's 7 pillars?
Well, they think there's 7 heavens. Yeah. There's actually 3 according to the Bible, and you've been given many things that picture that. Genesis 6:16. The ark that Noah was on is a picture of that. He says, a window shalt thou make in the ark, and it shall be a cube, and in a cubit shalt thou finish it above, and the door of the ark shalt thou set in the side thereof. With lower, second, and third stories shalt thou make it. So there's 3 stories, and there's going to be 3 heavens. Ezekiel 42. Ezekiel 42. This is probably the millennial temple here. Or maybe it's the one in eternity. I don't know. There's a lot of details in this thing in Ezekiel. Ezekiel is a tough book. You start reading... Yeah. You start reading that Ezekiel, and you just pull your hair out trying to figure out what are all these details talking about. Ezekiel 42:6. For they were in 3 stories, but had not pillars, so forth, so on. He's telling you here the temple is going to be a 3-storied temple. Quite something. Well, that's totally different than Solomon's. And that's the picture there. We know that's a fact as a picture of heaven because Paul tells us. 2 Corinthians. 2 Corinthians 12, verse 1. 2 Corinthians 12:1. It is not expedient for me, doubtless, to glory. I will come to visions and revelations of the Lord. I knew a man in Christ above 14 years ago, whether in the body, I cannot tell, or whether out of the body, I cannot tell. God knoweth. Such an one caught up to the 3rd heaven. Okay, so there's 3 of them. He was at the top. And I knew such a man, whether in the body or out of the body, I cannot tell. God knoweth. He's speaking in 3rd person here. Okay, I think 3 is important because he's telling us about the 3rd heaven. So he switches to 3rd person to talk about it. How that he was caught up into paradise and heard unspeakable words which is not lawful for a man to utter. Okay, the 3rd heaven. There's 3 of them. I'm not going to read all of these to you, but it's good information to know, so I'll give you the notes on it. There are 3 heavens. Here's where the 1st heaven is, the open firmament, the oxygen we breathe. Genesis 1:20 and Psalms 148, verse 8. The 2nd heaven, that's where the stars are. That's Hebrews 12:22, Genesis 1:1, Psalms 148, verse 2, and 2 Corinthians 12:2. Every now and then you'll come across somebody who doesn't understand heavens, or you'll confront somebody with a modern version. To me, that's one of the first things that I notice. Of course, it doesn't mean much to some people, but verse 1 of most versions, I don't have my list of versions out, I got a whole box full of them back there, but every modern version changes Genesis 1:1 to heavens, plural. It was heaven, singular. It doesn't become plural until he starts dividing it up. Now, our verse in Amos, I know it's been a while since we saw it, but our verse in Amos talked about a troop and the Lord God of hosts. And he's talking about these stories he has in heaven. Okay, so he's got different levels in heaven, and he has hosts. He has mighty warriors. And I believe he has warriors in every heaven. You're going to also find out he has warriors on the earth. Daniel chapter 4. Daniel chapter 4. Daniel 4, verse 35. God has a troop. Remember, he talked about a troop, or a host on earth. Daniel 4, verse 35. And all the inhabitants of the earth are reputed as nothing, and he doth according to his will in the armies of heaven and among the inhabitants of the earth. Okay, so both with heaven and with earth. And none can stay his hand, or say unto him, what doest thou? He does that. You find that in the book of Daniel. Michael's up there fighting with some kind of a battle that's going on in the spirit realm, and he comes down here to help Daniel with his issues. Okay, so there's 2 battles going on. God's got an army on both sides, both in earth and in heaven. One of God's favorite titles as his own description is the Lord of hosts. That is, he's a mighty general. He calls himself a man of war. Look at 2 Chronicles. 2 Chronicles 33:5. Second Chronicles 33:5. Who is this? did I say? 33:5. Manasseh. Okay, yeah, Manasseh, he was a bad guy. 2 Chronicles 33:5. And he built altars for all the hosts of heaven in the two courts of the house of the Lord. Whew! Talk about an apostate church. That's in the house of the Lord. They set up some altars to worship satanic things, the host. Now that tells you that there's an opposing force out there. Now they're not equal. The devil is not as strong as God. That's clear. Matter of fact, the devil has to bend to whatever God demands of him. He doesn't get a choice in that. Acts 7 verse 42. Acts 7 verse 42. This is a good parallel to Romans chapter 1. In Romans chapter 1, you find the road to degradation, how God continues to turn a man over to more and more vile things in order to wake him up. He did the same thing in the Old Testament. Acts 7 verse 42. Then God turned and gave them up to worship the host of heaven. Same phrasing, gave up. Gave them up to worship the host of heaven. As it is written in the book of the prophets. O ye house of Israel, have ye offered to me slain beasts and sacrificed by the space of 40 years in the wilderness? Okay, God has troops not only in the heavenlies, and that's something that we're not even supposed to be worried about. You'll find people who love to delve into the supernatural. Just leave it. I got enough trouble with the natural. Why would I worry about the super? Something that's not written in the Bible. Isaiah chapter 10. Isaiah 10. Now, just like in the supernatural, the devil has to do what God tells him to. Now, I've shown it to you before. I believe it's Revelation 17, 16 or something like that, where God forces the heathen to give their kingdom over to the Antichrist. He puts it in their heart to fulfill his will and give their kingdom to the beast. He does the same thing with armies and nations down here. He forces them to work for him. We see it in the nation of Israel. Assyria and Babylon, at God's command, come in and take out Israel. That's not because of their own making. God instigated all that. Isaiah 10 verse 6. I will send him against an hypocritical nation, and against the people of my wrath will I give him a charge to take the spoil and the prey, and to tread them down like mire in the streets. This is God's instruction to what we would consider a pagan. But it's part of his host. He'll use any army that man has built. He created man, he owns them. He can make them do whatever he wants them to. Isaiah 13 verse 4. The noise of a multitude in the mountains, like as of a great people, a tumultuous sound of the kingdoms of the nations gathered together. The Lord of hosts mustereth the host of the battle. He's saying there, God is the great general, and all of those nations getting together ready to fight is God saying, it's time to start the battle. Isaiah 19 verse 2. And I will set the Egyptians against the Egyptians, and they shall fight every one against his brother. Civil war. Isaiah 19 2. Yeah, did I say Revelation? No. Yeah.
That's just what I heard.
Yeah, there's no telling what I say. He says, and every one against his neighbor. City against city, kingdom against kingdom. Same thing happens with Gideon. They come down there, and before he knows it, they're fighting each other. He's just up there holding lamps and playing tunes on his trumpet, and the guys, the Midianites, turned on each other. God creates civil war anytime he wants to. Isaiah 31 verse 4. For thus hath the Lord spoken unto me, like as a lion and a young lion roaring on his prey, when a multitude of shepherds is called forth against him. He will not be afraid of their voice, nor abase himself for the noise of them. So shall the Lord of hosts come down to fight for Mount Zion and for the hill thereof. That tells you, you'll see this pop up all through the Bible. Israel, the plot of ground, God's very jealous about. And he says right here in this verse, he's willing to duke it out with anybody who thinks they can take it from him. That's why it's dangerous to try to make a peace treaty with anybody over there in the Middle East, because the number one goal of everybody in the Middle East is get their fingers on Israel. And they don't even understand it. It's satanic is what it is. Amos 9 verse 7. He says, are you not as children's, not children's, are you not children of the Ethiopians unto me, O children of Israel? He said, aren't you just like a heathen? And yeah, the answer was yes. Saith the Lord, have not I brought up Israel out of the land of Egypt, and the Philistines from Caphtor, and the Syrian from Kir? Behold, the eyes of the Lord God are upon the sinful nation, and will destroy it from off the face of the earth, saving that I will not utterly destroy the house of Jacob, saith the Lord. For lo, I will command, and I will sift the house of Israel among all nations, like as corn is sifted in a sieve, yet shall not the least grain fall into the earth. Israel is likened to wheat. You'll find that in Matthew. And they're the opposite of Israel would be the pagans, and they would be the tares in the parables. And so there's the same analogy being used. Jeremiah 5:15. God speaking here. He says, lo, I will bring a nation upon you from afar. That's God saying that, as though he owns the nation, and he does. There's not a nation down here that he can't move any way he wants to anytime. O house of Israel, saith the Lord, it is a mighty nation. It is an ancient nation, a nation whose language thou knowest not, neither understandest what they say. This is this is kind of a sidetrack, but I'm going to jump on it and jump right back off of it. This is tongues. Israel was supposed to hear somebody speaking a language they did not understand. It was a sign of punishment to a nation. Tongues is not a sign of blessing. It's a sign of wrath to come. Now, what you do with the wrath message is up to you. That could be a very good thing for you. You might fall right in line with what God says if you hear that tongue and click. For Israel, they were supposed to hear a tongue they did not understand, and a language. It was punishment. Look at Jeremiah 1 verse 10. Jeremiah 1:10. I should know this. Who is this? Is this Nebuchadnezzar? It's got to be. Yeah. Jeremiah 1:10. See, I have this day set thee over the nations and over the kingdoms, to root out, to pull down, to destroy, to throw down, to build, and to plant. God is a great general. He's a great destroyer, but that's never his goal. He can do all of those things, and if necessary, he will. The end of the verse is great. It ends just like the little phrase we saw in our passage in Amos. He's going to build, and he's going to plant. He's going to get something good out of all of this. Genesis chapter 2. Genesis 2, verse 1. Genesis 2, verse 1. Thus the heavens and the earth were finished, and all the host of them. Okay? Maybe I'm going to reach for some straws here that aren't there, but I think I'm onto something here. The host of heaven, the heavens plural, I think each heaven has a host, has an army, and we'll identify it in the Bible. Psalm 33, verse 6. Psalm 33, 6. By the word of the Lord were the heavens made, and all the hosts of, plural, them, by the breath of his mouth. So the hosts of heaven means a host per heaven, at least one. We'll find these hosts. Genesis 1:1 tells you the third heaven. That's the throne room, the top. In the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth, so that heaven has to have a host. He'll be found in 1 Kings 22:19. And he said, "Hear thou therefore the word of the Lord. I saw the Lord sitting on his throne, and all the host of heaven standing by him on his right hand and on his left." So that fits right with what we're saying. In the throne room, the third heaven, there is a host. Somebody says, "I was looking up there and I saw it." He was standing right there, and the host was on his right and on his left. Look at 2 Chronicles 18. 2 Chronicles 18. Oh, you know what? I should have put this on the screen for y'all. I got so many verses tonight. I didn't even think of it. See if I can make it come up on the screen. Make it easier. Yeah, 2 Chronicles 18:18. Again he said, "Therefore hear the word of the Lord. I saw the Lord sitting upon a throne, in all the host of heaven standing on his right and on his left." I already read that one. Nehemiah 9, verse 6. It says, "Thou, even thou art the Lord alone. Thou hast made heaven, the heaven of heavens," that's two of them, "with all their hosts." Each heaven has a host. "The earth and all things that are therein, the sea and all that is therein, and thou preservest them all. The hosts of heaven worshipeth thee." They better. He's real close. Luke chapter 2. Luke 2, verse 13. That third heaven's host stepped right to the door of the third heaven and shouted down to earth one day. Luke 2, verse 13. "And suddenly there was with the angels a multitude of the heavenly host, praising God and saying, Glory to God in the highest, and on earth peace, goodwill toward men." Wording is very important. He says there's a heavenly host, and they came down and mingled with the angels. So that means two separate classifications. I think words are important, and he's differentiated the two. Okay, that's the third heaven. The second heaven, that's outer space where the stars are, the place that astronauts claim they go. Genesis 1, that's described to us in Genesis 1, verse 8 to 17. I'm not going to read the passage. It's long, but you can when you get home. Deuteronomy 4, verse 19. Here's the host of that heaven. "Unless thou lift up thine eyes unto heaven, and when thou seest the sun," that's the outer space, "and the moon and the stars, even all the host of heaven, shouldst be driven to worship them, and serve them which the Lord thy God hath divided unto the nations under the whole heaven." This is something a human could see with his eyes. And he says there's a host out there, and I don't want you worshiping the host. Well, men still are worshiping that host. The astrological signs, the galaxies and the stars and all that stuff, and getting your horoscopes and all that crazy mess. Horoscopes, that's somebody begging to be lied to. You sign up for a horoscope. There's no way to verify any of that. I'm going to tell you, I'm in the wrong business. Deuteronomy 17, verse 3. "And hath gone and served other gods and worshipped them. Neither the sun, nor the moon, nor any of the hosts of heaven, which I have not commanded." Okay, let's notice the categories here. Neither the sun or the moon. Those were the two major gods all the way through the Old Testament. The sun god and the moon god. One was male, one was female. Baal, Ashtoreth. All the way through the Bible, the names change, but the gods are the same. Sun and moon, nor any of the hosts of heaven. Okay, so probably some supernatural, that what we call mythology that the Greeks have. They're probably seeing something. They're probably eating some bad mushrooms or something, and their eyes got open to the spirit realm, and they saw some of that mess that's out there. 2 Kings 17.
What was the Genesis verse on yesterday?
The passage in Genesis for the second heaven?
Yeah, the one you did, one right?
The one I didn't read?
Yeah.
That's Genesis 1, verse 8 to 17.
Okay.
That gives you information on the second heaven. In 2 Kings 21:3 says, "For he built up again the high places which Hezekiah his father had destroyed, and he reared up altars for Baal." That's the male, the sun god. "And made a grove," that's the female, "as did Ahab, king of Israel, and worshipped all the host of heaven and served them." That's something out in the second heaven. They're looking out into the sky and imagining things. And the sky is not supposed to preach that to you. You've got to have a wicked imagination if you look at the sky and you start imagining demonic things out there. God says in Psalms 19, the heavens declare the glory of God. And if you're giving his glory to the devil, that's really bad. Jeremiah 8, verse 2. "And they shall spread them before the sun and the moon." Those two famous gods. He's not saying there are literal sun and moon, and that's not a god. God created that. However, man likes to make that become God. But God, somebody had to create the sun and the moon. I don't know why their thinking stopped there. "And all the host of heaven, whom they have loved, whom they have served, after whom they have walked, and whom they have sought, and whom they have worshipped, they shall not be gathered, nor burned, nor buried, for they shall be dung upon the face of the earth." That's exactly what happens when Nebuchadnezzar comes in. He comes in and destroys Jerusalem. He's destroying to such a degree they don't have time or place to bury them. They just throw them out in the streets. And we've seen that in the book of Amos as well. The first heaven, the one we're familiar with, our atmosphere, our oxygen levels comes from this heaven. That's in Genesis 1:20, where the fowls, the birds fly in the open firmament of heaven. Okay, Genesis 7:23. "And every living substance was destroyed which was upon the face of the ground, both man and cattle and creeping thing, and the fowl of heaven." Okay, wherever the birds are, that's a heaven. That's where fowl's home is in the heaven. Now, we don't think that's very high off the ground. It's 1 millimeter off the ground and it's heaven. It's some heaven. It belongs to the boundary line for the first heaven. Psalm 79, verse 2. He said, "The dead bodies of thy servants have they given to me meat unto the fowls of heaven." That phrase keeps popping up all through there, so that man will identify wherever the birds fly, God considers it a heaven. And that's, you can start doing the calculations. When you get over there to 2 Corinthians and you find out Paul went to a third one, well, then you just do the math. And I've got too many verses on this subject. Let's see. Okay, let's go back to Amos. In Amos, he says, we're in Amos, I believe it's 9:6. It says, "He calleth for the waters of the sea, and poureth them upon the face of the earth." Okay, so this was a punishment. God called for water and dumped it on the earth. This has happened at least twice, and it's going to happen partially another time in the tribulation. Genesis 1:2. "And the earth was without form and void, and darkness was upon the face of the deep." There's that water. "And the Spirit of God moved upon the face of the waters." Okay, there's one time that he dumped water on the earth. or dump the earth in the water. 2 Peter 3:6. He says, whereby the world that then was, being overflowed with water, perished. God's got some big hands. So when he reached over there and grabbed him a handful of water and dumped it on the earth, I think what happened, and you can see it from 2 Peter, was that like throwing a tennis ball into a puddle or a tub or something. That ball will bounce. It's of course going to float for a little while. It'll float. That's what the earth did. It floated in that water and bounced up and down, and then it sunk. He says in 2 Peter 3:6, whereby the world that then was, being overflowed with water, perished. It overflowed and it perished. It's no more. Now that can't be our earth. He goes on to say, but the heaven and earth which are now. Okay, that's the one I'm on. So he's talking about there was at one time a heaven and an earth that perished, that went bye-bye. And that was the one in Genesis 1:2. Jeremiah 4 verse 23. Jeremiah 4:23. This is a little used passage, but it's very telling of what happened during that time period when God destroyed Lucifer's earth. Jeremiah 4:23. I beheld the earth, and lo, it was without form and void, and the heavens, and they had no light. Okay, that's talking about Genesis 1 and 2. So he says a word right there that would throw people off. Somebody would say that can't apply. That cannot apply because it says heavens plural. And in Genesis 1:1 it's heaven singular. So how can that apply? Because the heavens are made out of what? The heaven. Now you can't reverse it. He couldn't have said heavens and then you make it heaven, but you can go the other direction because that's the way he did it. He took the heaven and broke it up into three. It's still the same heaven. Verse 24, I beheld the mountains, and lo, they trembled, and all the hills moved lightly. I beheld, and lo, there was no man. And all the birds of the heavens, plural, fled. Now, I don't have time to get into it. Fowls of the air are a picture in the Bible of satanic beings. And you'll find it all through the Bible, and the fowls are what they're called. Now he says, there was no man. So it's just a casual reading of it, you would think there were men and now there are not any men. But no, it just means there were no men. There were some angelic beings. There were some cherubim. There were some supernatural things that God had originally put on the globe to run it. But there were no men. Verse 26. I beheld, lo, the fruitful place was a wilderness, and all the cities thereof were broken down at the presence of the Lord and by his fierce anger. Okay, so there were cities, maybe Masada, maybe Petra, maybe some of those things, maybe some of the pyramids were still here or were here at that time. I don't know, but whatever it was, Lucifer had some cities he was running on this globe. Verse 24. For thus saith the Lord, for thus the Lord saith, the whole land shall be desolate, yet will I not make a full end. Now, he didn't make a full end. When he pulled the earth back up out of its watery grave, he recreated for Adam out of what he began with the earth he turned over to Lucifer. Ezekiel 28 verse 15. Ezekiel 28:15 says, thou was perfect in thy ways from the day that thou wast created till iniquity was found in thee. By the multitude of thy merchandise they have filled the midst of thee with violence. Violence is satanic. The first time it shows up in the Bible, you can look up the word violence, it's satanic. And thou hast sinned. Therefore, I will cast thee as profane out of the mount of God. That's the throne room. And I will destroy thee, O covering cherub, from the midst of the stones of fire. Okay, he was part of the hosts of heaven, a cherub. And God says, you got your end coming, buddy. Yeah, you know his problem began, we got it clearly defined in Isaiah 14. I'll ascend, I'll go up, I got me some wings and I'll fly and I'll get up there. Now cherub do have wings. Angels don't, but cherubs do. Matter of fact, they have more wings than you can draw. I heard somebody tell me the other day, cherub do have wings, and everybody who draws them wrong. They draw them with feathers. They don't have feathers. They're mammals. They would be like a bat. That's the way their wings would be.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah. It sounds right, though. Yeah. Doesn't say that. Yeah. Verse 19. Well, let's see. Now, this is interesting. Where am I? Isaiah 14. You know, this is the whole scene played out for us there. He's saying, I'm Lucifer, and I'm going to be greater than God, and I'm going to put my throne up over his. God says, you want to bet, buddy? Let me show you how powerful I am. Verse 17. That made the world a wilderness, just like we read in Ezekiel, and destroyed the cities thereof, just like we read in Ezekiel, that opened not the house of his prisoners. So he was running a global organization, and that was his job. Lucifer's job was. And he had a prison. You'll find that thing in, I believe it's 1 Samuel 22, 21, 22, right in there, where he describes Jesus Christ coming down to make a collection. And when he comes down, Lucifer wages war against him. Part of that is a prison house. Verse 19. But thou art cast out of thy grave like an abominable branch. A branch is supposed to be the type of Christ. Well, the devil uses it too. Verse 20. Thou shalt not be joined with them in burial, because thou hast destroyed thy land and slain thy people. The seed of evildoers shall never be, and then an interesting word, renowned. Now, let's think about that. Is it true? Evildoers are not renowned? No, we know some very renowned evildoers. I would say Hitler was fairly renowned, and he was quite an evildoer. The Bible has a different definition of words than we do, so we've got to get God's definitions in order to understand what he's saying. This word renowned is used throughout the Bible, and it means something to God that it doesn't necessarily mean to man. Genesis 6, verse 4. I'm moving fast because I got to finish this thing up. Genesis 6, verse 4. There were giants in the earth in those days, and also after that, when the sons of God came in unto the daughters of men, and they bare children unto them, the same became mighty men which were of old, men of renown. Now, you might not have a full understanding of what that verse is yet until we get to the end of this. But what's going on here is these satanic beings come to earth, or maybe not satanic. Once they do this, they become satanic. They come down and they find a body of a saint who was dead. They inhabit that body and bring it back to life. Then they go have children with a woman, and that produces an offspring that's called a giant. Ezekiel 16. Ezekiel 16:14. It says, And thy renown went forth among the heathen for thy beauty, for thou wast perfect through my comeliness, which I put upon thee, saith the Lord. This is God talking to Israel. He says, you were a nothing, you were a naked baby cast out, nobody wanted anything to do with you. I picked you up, cleaned you up, made you beautiful. And he says, your renown is because I gave you some renown. Verse 15. But thou didst trust in thine own beauty, and placed the heart because of thy renown. It wasn't hers, it was God's that he gave her. And pouredst out thy fornication upon every one that passed by. His it was. Ezekiel 23:23. The Babylonians and all the Chaldeans, Pekah, Shoah, and Koah, and all the Assyrians with them, all of them desirable young men, captains and rulers, great lords and renowned, all of them riding upon horses. Now, we saw our verse said that the wicked won't be renowned. Here's a whole list of people that are wicked that he called renowned. How can a wicked person be renowned, but yet God said the wicked won't be renowned? Got to be an answer to it. We'll find it. Ezekiel 26:17. And they shall take up a lamentation for thee, and say to thee, how art thou destroyed, that was inhabited of seafaring men, the renowned city, which was strong in the sea. She had her inhabitants, which caused her to their terror to be on all that hunt thee. Hunt it. I can't read. All that hunt it. This is referring to Babylon. Babylon is renowned. Now that's not a person. It's a city. God's got a city too, and it's female, just like this one's a female. But we're going to get the answer in just a second. I got to get there. There it is. Ezekiel 39, verse 13. Yea, all the people of the land shall bury them. It shall be to them a renowned. The day that I shall be glorified, saith the Lord God. If God gets glory out of it, it's his renowned, not the man's. So he can use all of the Assyrians, the Babylonians, all of those evil nations to come in at his orders, and he can receive glory from that. So that's renowned. Now the wicked think, they'll, just like Israel did, they'll think that renown belongs to them, and it doesn't. And the second they start trying to claim it as their own, he'll remind them real quickly whose it is.
What does the word renown?
Renown means something that God gets glory from. So sometimes God gets glory from destroying even his own children, like he did with the nation of Israel. And he used the heathen to do it with. Doesn't mean that the heathen was anything special on their own. God just happened to pick them up as his spanking instrument. Gave him a good switching with the Assyrian.